I never thought death would come for me this way. I was a devout Muslim, born and raised in a traditional household where faith was the cornerstone of everything. We prayed 5 times a day. We fasted. We honored our elders. I believed in Allah with all my heart. But nothing in my upbringing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. It started as a cough, simple, irritating, nothing alarming. But within days it grew more violent, almost like something inside me was trying to escape. I went to the clinic where they told me it was just a respiratory infection. Plenty of fluids and rest, the doctor said, but I could feel something deeper was wrong. A sense of heaviness sat on my chest, not just physical, but spiritual, like a shadow had settled over me. Within a week I was in the hospital, hooked up to machines, oxygen tubes snaking into my nose. My wife stood by my side, tears brimming in her eyes. She held my hand and whispered prayers under her breath, as if trying to hold back death with every syllable. I remember looking at her, trying to smile, trying to reassure her that I would be fine. But deep inside, I knew I wasn't coming back from this. The doctors were kind, but their faces betrayed their words. Every time they spoke to each other in hushed tones just outside my room, I could feel my fate being sealed. I could see it in my mother's eyes when she came to visit, how she kissed my forehead like it might be the last time. I could see it in my children's awkward, confused silence when they entered the room and saw their father so weak, so unlike the man they knew. One night, after hours of drifting in and out of consciousness, I felt something shift, a stillness, a silence so complete it seemed to come from another realm. The machines were still beeping, nurses still moving about, but to me it was as if the whole world had gone quiet. I remember hearing the adhan, the call to prayer, but it wasn't coming from any speaker. It was inside me, echoing deep in my soul, beckoning me somewhere far beyond the walls of that hospital room. And then the pain began to fade, not gradually, but all at once. It was like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out every ounce of suffering. My breathing eased. The weight on my chest lifted, and for the first time in days I felt light, so light I thought I was floating. I looked around, confused. I could still see the hospital room, but it was distant, almost like watching through a foggy window. I saw my own body lying there, motionless, surrounded by doctors scrambling and alarms blaring. I was dead, and yet I was more alive than I had ever been. I didn't feel fear. I felt peace. But there was something else too, an overwhelming presence, as if something or someone was waiting for me, watching, calling. I thought I would be met by angels, by the familiar imagery from my faith, perhaps even the angel of death, Azrael, coming to escort me to the next world. But what I encountered next was nothing like I had ever been taught, and it would shake the very foundation of everything I believed. But that part of the story, that comes soon. The last sound I remember from the world of the living was the flatline of the heart monitor, a long, sharp tone that echoed like a final trumpet. The doctors shouted, nurses rushed in, and hands pressed on my chest in rapid bursts. But I was already gone, watching from somewhere above, detached from the panic. I saw my body, limp, lifeless, my eyes closed, mouth slightly open. It was unsettling and yet strangely freeing. The noise around me began to fade, not like someone turning down the volume, but as if it were being absorbed into something greater. Everything slowed. Everything stopped. Then, darkness. Not the kind of darkness we fear, not cold or suffocating. It was still, vast, infinite. A silence that had depth, like I was floating in the space between thoughts, between breaths. I had no body anymore, but I was still me. My awareness was sharper than ever. Every part of my existence felt exposed. There were no lies here, no masks, no roles, just truth. I wondered, is this Barzakh, the place between this life and the next? But I felt no judgment, no immediate reckoning, only waiting, anticipation, as if something sacred was about to be revealed. Then, in that silence, a presence emerged. At first it was only light, a soft glow in the distance. But this light wasn't like the sun or a lamp. It was alive. A warmth so profound it made me feel like I was being remembered, like someone had known me long before I ever took my first breath. The light grew brighter, and with it came music? No, not quite. It was more like harmony itself. Every note I'd ever loved, every word that had ever soothed me, every tear I had ever shed, wrapped into a soundless song that moved through my soul. I began to drift toward it. Memories surfaced, not just scenes from my life, but emotions, people, moments I had forgotten. The smell of my mother's cooking, the feeling of my father's hand on my shoulder the day I graduated, the way my wife smiled at me when I held our first child, and also the shameful moments, the lies I told, the anger I couldn't control, the times I turned away when someone needed help. It all came at once, and yet I didn't feel condemned. I felt known. The closer I came to the light, the more the darkness around me dissolved, like it had only existed to give contrast to what was ahead. I sensed others, souls perhaps, moving alongside me, also drawn towards something beautiful, something real. And then he appeared. At first, just a silhouette, a figure within the light. I expected an angel, or perhaps a prophet, but as he stepped forward, I felt something crack open inside me. My whole being trembled, not with fear, but with awe. His face was unlike anything I'd ever seen, radiant, calm, filled with an indescribable love that pierced every layer of my soul. His eyes met mine, and in that gaze, I saw everything. He didn't speak, not yet, but somehow I understood. He knew me, all of me, and still, he loved me. I couldn't understand why. Why was this man, this figure, so familiar, yet completely unexpected? And then the realization hit me, not as a thought, but as a certainty. It was Jesus. The very name I had spoken only in passing, the man I had learned about but never truly known. He was here, not as a prophet among many, not as a historical figure, but as something far more intimate and eternal. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but I couldn't move. I could only receive. And in that holy stillness, he finally spoke, not with words, but with a voice that filled every corner of who I was. I have always been with you. I broke. I wept. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of homecoming. Because in that moment I realized something that would change everything. The story I had believed about life, death, and God was about to be rewritten. If you're feeling drawn in by this story, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone. Your story matters too. I used to think that when someone died, their soul simply vanished, either up, down, or nowhere at all. But as I stood, floated above my lifeless body, the truth was undeniable. I was still me. I could see everything with a clarity that made my earthly vision feel like a blur. The hospital room below was a scene of chaos, but I was calm, watching from a place that felt higher, not just physically, but spiritually, elevated, untethered. My body lay still, pale, small. It struck me how fragile we are, how much we believe we are our bodies, when in truth they are just temporary garments. The doctors were trying everything, chest compressions, injections, shouting commands. My wife sobbed in the corner, clutching my prayer beads. One of my sons was being held outside the door by a nurse, crying, unaware his father had already left. I wanted to comfort them, to speak, to say, I'm still here, but my voice no longer belonged to this world. I had no hands, no mouth, just awareness and love. A love so overwhelming I thought I might dissolve into it. As I hovered, the room seemed to stretch, shift. The walls faded into light and then into something else, something vast. It was like the veil between dimensions had been pulled back. The hospital no longer felt like a place of medicine, but a portal, a doorway. I wasn't alone anymore. I felt the presence of others, souls, guides, beings of light. None of them spoke in words, but I understood them fully. They weren't judging me. They were welcoming me. One of them came closer. I couldn't see a face, only an outline made of light, but the feeling was unmistakable. Compassion, wisdom, safety. I asked silently, "Where am I going?" And the response came not as a sound, but a deep knowing. "You are going home." Home. That word meant something completely different now. It wasn't my house or my country, or even my religion. It was something deeper, older, like the place my soul had come from before I was born. Then the space around me changed. I was no longer in the hospital. It was like being swept into a river of light, gentle, steady, pulling me forward. Below me, I could still faintly see the earth, cities glowing, people walking, cars moving, so busy, so distracted. But from here, it all seemed quiet, fleeting, like a dream I was waking up from. As I moved forward, memories came again. This time not just mine. I felt the hearts of people I'd hurt, the kindness I'd offered, the moments I'd ignored. It wasn't punishment. It was perspective. It was truth. Everything mattered. Every act of love had weight. Every moment of bitterness left a mark. And yet, I was being shown it all with tenderness. Then I saw something that made me stop. A child. She was standing in the distance, surrounded by light, smiling at me. My breath caught, though I had no lungs. I knew her. My daughter. The one we lost when she was only 2. Her name was Layla. We never really talked about her after she passed. The pain was too much. My wife and I buried the grief deep, each carrying it alone. But here she was, radiant, whole, more alive than I'd ever seen her. She didn't run to me. She just looked at me with eyes full of love and knowing, as if to say, "I've been waiting." And then she vanished into the light, not to abandon me, but to lead me toward what was coming. The river of light carried me farther, and the feeling changed. It wasn't just peace now, it was preparation, as if something or someone was approaching. That's when I felt it again, that same presence from before. Jesus, not distant this time, near. I knew my journey had only just begun. What I would see, what I would hear in the next moments, would challenge everything I had ever believed, not to destroy it, but to expand it, to purify it, because the truth I was about to uncover would change not just my life, but the way I saw eternity itself. If this story resonates with something deep in your soul, leave a comment below. You never know how your story might touch someone else who needs it. As I drifted further from the world I once knew, the light around me began to change. It wasn't blinding or harsh. It was gentle, golden, almost breathing. It pulsed with life, with love. It seemed to know me, to wrap around me like it had been waiting for this moment. The presence I'd felt earlier, Jesus, was still near, but he didn't speak again. Not yet. I wasn't ready for words. I needed to see. Then the light parted like a curtain slowly opening. What lay beyond took my breath away, if I'd still had lungs to breathe with. It was a place, a realm, not a city, not a garden, not anything I could have imagined. It defied description, but I'll try to give it words. The ground shimmered with energy that looked like glass and fire at once. The sky wasn't above. It was all around, filled with colors I had never seen on Earth, hues that didn't just glow, but sang. There were no shadows here, no decay, no time. It was alive. I saw what looked like buildings, but not built with stone or metal. They were woven from light, from intention. Some stood tall, like temples. Others stretched wide like open arms. They weren't places to inhabit, but to become. I could feel that somehow. This was not a destination, but a transformation. And there were others, beings, souls. Some looked human or close to it. Others were forms of light and movement. No fear radiated from them, only welcome. They didn't speak, but we communicated. Instantly, deeply. They knew me and I knew them. Not by name or face, but by essence, like meeting old friends I had forgotten in this lifetime. One of them approached me. A woman, gentle, luminous. I didn't recognize her at first, but then a memory surfaced. She had been in a dream I once had as a child, a dream I had dismissed, forgotten. In that dream, she had comforted me after a nightmare, whispering that I was never alone. Now I understood. She was real. She had always been with me, just beyond the veil. A guide, a soul connected to mine, family of the soul. She led me through the realm, not by walking, but by simply willing us forward. And as we moved, I began to see something even more extraordinary. Souls reuniting, mothers with children, friends embracing, lovers holding hands, crying tears that shimmered and evaporated into light. There was no grief here, only completion, wholeness. I realized this place was home to them, and maybe to me too. But still something stirred in me, questions, doubts. My whole life, I had followed a path that told me heaven would look different, that Jesus wasn't for me, that salvation was earned through obedience and judgment, not through love and grace. Yet here I was, standing in a place of unspeakable beauty, feeling more loved and accepted than I had ever felt in all my years of striving. And Jesus, he was still here. not watching from afar. Near, always near. Suddenly we stopped before a vast structure, or presence. It was hard to describe. It was like a library, a cathedral, a living memory. I felt drawn toward it, and as we entered, I saw visions, not just of my life, but of many lives. A tapestry of humanity, woven together by choices, by love, by pain, by redemption. I understood something profound in that moment. Every life matters. Every soul is cherished, and no one is forgotten. And then, at the heart of it all, I saw it. A great light, brighter than the sun but not painful. Pure, radiant, unfiltered love. It didn't speak, it didn't move, but it knew me. It was knowing. It was the source, the one. And beside it, Jesus. Not as a figure of religion, not as a rival to God, but as an extension of this love. A bridge, a guide, a healer. I stood in silence, trembling, not from fear, but from awe. Everything I believed was being undone, not by force, but by truth. Gentle, relentless truth. The place I never expected to see was more real than anything I had ever known. He was standing there, just a few steps ahead, in the center of that golden stillness. His figure shimmered not like a ghost, but like the truest form of a man, alive, solid, eternal, not cloaked in robes of power or fear, but in something far more overwhelming, compassion. I had seen pictures of him before, in books, movies, even paintings, but none of those images could prepare me for the person in front of me now. His face, I still struggled to describe it. It wasn't about the shape of his features or the color of his eyes. It was what shone through them, a gaze that pierced straight through to who I was, not just the man I had become, but the boy I had once been, the tears I had hidden, the fears I never confessed. He saw everything, and yet he smiled. I wanted to look away. I felt so exposed, so small, like every falsehood I'd ever believed about myself and about God was dissolving in his presence. Not because he tore it away, but because it simply couldn't exist in the same space as his truth. He stepped closer. No words, no sound, just the weight of presence, a love so strong I couldn't bear it. And still I didn't want it to end. In a voice that came not through ears, but directly into my soul, I asked, "Are you Jesus?" He didn't nod. He didn't need to. The truth was already within me. I just needed to name it. He said, without moving his lips, "I am." That was it. 2 words. But they shattered everything I thought I knew. I was raised to believe Jesus was a prophet, respected, but human. A messenger. Not the Son of God, not the bridge to the divine. I had prayed to Allah with sincerity all my life, and I still believed in the one God. But here I was, standing before the one whom my tradition had taught me to honor at a distance, now discovering he had never been distant at all. There was no accusation in his gaze, no demand for conversion, no lecture, only invitation. I felt it, like a hand gently reaching into the deepest part of me and saying, "Let go. Let go of fear. Let go of pride. Let go of control. Let go of everything I thought I had to earn in order to be loved." And I wept. Not because I was ashamed, but because I had never known I was this loved. He moved toward me, closer now. His eyes never left mine. I didn't fall to the ground. I didn't bow. I simply opened. Everything inside me opened, as if the walls around my soul had finally broken and light was pouring in. He touched my shoulder, and the moment his hand rested on me, visions flooded in. Not just of my life, but of others, of people across the world who had called out in the darkness and been answered by the same light. Men, women, children, from every nation, every background, different faiths, different stories, yet all drawn by the same voice. I saw those who had died alone now cradled in warmth. I saw mothers reunited with children. I saw skeptics who had doubted everything fall into his arms in utter surrender, overwhelmed by love they never knew existed. And then I saw myself, my younger self. The boy who had once hidden in a closet to cry after being bullied. The teen who felt the weight of expectations, trying to be perfect to earn approval. The man who had feared death, feared failure, feared being not enough. Jesus looked into that version of me and whispered, "You were never alone." I fell into his arms. There was no need for words after that, only knowing, only healing. It was as if his embrace rewrote the story I had been telling myself for decades. The story of striving, of proving, of fearing, replaced by a story of being found, of being seen, of being held. In his presence I understood something that no doctrine or debate could teach. Truth is not just an idea. Truth is a person. And he had just embraced me. I had spent my entire life believing that love had to be earned, that approval came through obedience, that forgiveness required punishment, that mercy was granted only after one had proven their worth. But in his arms, everything I thought I knew collapsed in silence. Jesus, this figure I was taught to respect but never to follow, was now holding me like a long-lost brother finally found. There was no tension in his embrace, no conditions. It wasn't the love of a teacher for a student, or even of a master for a servant. It was the love of someone who had always known me, always been with me, even when I had never called his name. That realization shattered me, because in my world, Jesus was never for me. He was for them, for Christians, for others. I believed he was a good man, perhaps even a prophet, but distant, separate, not mine. But here in this place where lies couldn't survive, I saw the truth. He had never been the other. He had always been mine, waiting, watching, loving from a distance I had created, not him. I remembered moments in my life, times I had felt an unexplained peace in the midst of despair, a protection I couldn't understand. Once, during a car crash, when I should have died. Another time, kneeling in grief after my daughter passed away. I thought it was just the comfort of faith, but now I knew he was there. Even when I didn't know his name, even when I didn't believe he belonged to me. And now here he was, not asking me to worship him, not demanding allegiance, not even correcting my theology, just loving me, completely, without restraint. That kind of love felt dangerous. It threatened everything I'd built to protect myself, my pride, my certainty, my self-image, because to accept that kind of love meant surrendering control. I asked him, silently, in that place beyond words, why me? His response wasn't what I expected. He didn't say I was special. He didn't say I had done anything right. He simply said, because you are mine. Those words did something to me. They didn't just comfort me, they claimed me, not as property, but as a beloved, as someone who had been searched for, waited for, and finally returned. And then, I felt something rise inside me. Not fear, not doubt, but grief. Deep, aching grief. Not for my sins, not for my past, but for all the years I had lived without knowing this love. All the prayers I had recited without realizing whose arms were open behind them. All the walls I had built in the name of God, not knowing that God himself had broken them already. Jesus looked at me and gently placed his hand over my heart, and in that touch, I felt years of striving melt away. I saw the burdens I had carried, expectations, shame, comparison, being lifted, not by force, by grace, and I began to see others not as enemies, not as strangers, but as fellow souls also being pursued by this same love. I saw people from every walk of life, Muslims, Christians, Jews, atheists, doubters, seekers, each one known, each one seen, each one loved. I understood something I had never dared to believe. Jesus was not a divider. He was a bridge, not sent to pull people apart, but to bring them home. And yet, I couldn't ignore the conflict inside me. This went against everything I had been taught. If I embraced him, what would that mean for my identity, for my family, for my faith? He didn't answer those questions. He didn't need to. He simply stood with me in the tension, loving me in it, not rushing me out of it, because that's what love does. It waits, it holds, it remains. And as I stood there, embraced by the one I once considered the other, I realized he had never once considered me the enemy. After what felt like an eternity wrapped in the embrace of Jesus, the space around us began to shift again. The warmth remained, but I sensed we were moving, without walking, without distance, towards something sacred, something final. Then it appeared before me. A book. It wasn't resting on a table or held in anyone's hands. It hovered, suspended in light, glowing with a soft brilliance that seemed to radiate from within it. It pulsed with something more than knowledge. It pulsed with truth. I instinctively knew this was my book, The story of my life, not the version others saw, not the one I presented to the world, but the real one, the secret one, the one written with invisible ink on the fabric of my soul. Jesus stood beside me, silent, gentle. He did not open the book for me. He let me choose. And without hesitation, I reached forward, not with hands, but with my being, and the book opened. The first page was not my birth. It was my first conscious thought. I saw myself as a child, innocent, curious, full of wonder. I saw how I had looked at the world with open eyes, searching for meaning in everything. I saw the first time I felt fear, the first time I felt shame, the first time I believed I wasn't enough. Then the pages turned one after another, revealing moments I had forgotten or buried, not in shame, but in mercy. There were chapters of pain, when I had lied, when I had hurt others, when I had judged too quickly, or loved too little. Each moment played out in detail, not to accuse me, but to help me see. And I did see. I saw the why behind my choices, the wounds that shaped me, the beliefs that led me to fear, to hide, to control. I saw how my religion had been both a shelter and a sword, sometimes comforting me, other times keeping me from the very love I longed for. But then, I saw something else, something I hadn't expected. I saw the presence of Jesus in every chapter. He was there when I wept alone as a teenager, feeling lost and unseen. He was there when I prayed to a God I thought was far away, whispering my longing into the night. He was there in the eyes of the stranger who once helped me when I was stranded, in the unexpected peace that came during tragedy, in the moments I should have died but didn't. He had always been there, not waiting to punish, but waiting to be seen. And I wept, not out of guilt, but out of awe, because I realized the truth of my life had never been about perfection. It had always been about presence, about His presence. The book turned to one final section, a part that had not yet been written, and I understood. I was being given a choice, not between heaven and hell, not between reward and punishment, but between truth and fear, between love and control, between staying in this place of eternal rest or returning to the world I had left behind. I turned to Jesus, trembling, not with dread, but with the weight of knowing what was at stake. "What do?" I asked Him from the deepest part of me. He looked at me, and I felt those words again, not spoken but known. "I will be with you, no matter what you choose." There was no pressure, only freedom, and yet the truth was clear. Returning meant pain, suffering, misunderstanding. I would be changed, yes, but not always accepted. I would carry a message that others might reject. I might even lose people I loved. But I also saw the ripple effect, the lives that would be touched, the eyes that might open, the hope that could be shared. And then, gently, the book began to close. Not with finality, but with promise. It wasn't finished. My story wasn't over. The space around me quieted, though it had never been noisy. Everything in that realm moved with purpose, with peace. There was no rush, no pressure, yet I felt something pressing gently against my soul, a moment of decision. The book of my life hovered closed before me, still glowing, still alive. Jesus stood beside me, with the same unshakable patience He had shown since the moment I saw Him. I didn't want to leave. How could I? I had never felt so free, so loved, so whole. Every ache, every doubt, every longing I had ever carried, gone. In their place was clarity, belonging, and a rest that no sleep had ever offered. To stay here was to be truly at peace. But even in that place of perfect stillness, I could feel a pull, soft but firm. It wasn't from Jesus. It wasn't even from the realm itself. It was from life, from earth, from the world I had left behind. I saw my wife, curled beside my hospital bed, her head resting near my hand, eyes swollen with tears. I saw my sons, too young to understand why their father had slipped away. I saw my parents, old and trembling, praying with desperate hope that I would come back to them. And then I saw beyond them. I saw the people I hadn't yet met, strangers whose lives would one day intersect with mine, people drowning in grief, searching for hope, asking the very questions I had asked my whole life. I saw them sitting in darkness, and I knew. My experience was not just for me. I had seen something too important to keep to myself. But the cost. I turned to Jesus, full of sorrow and fear. "If I go back," I asked Him silently, "will I remember you? Will I remember this?" He looked at me with such gentleness, and I felt the answer pour into me, not as words, but as certainty. Not all of it, but enough. I would remember his presence. I would remember the love. I would remember the truth that changed everything, but the beauty, the light, the overwhelming clarity of this realm, that would fade. Not as a punishment, but as protection. Because if I remembered too much, I would never be able to function in the world again. I would long too desperately to return. Then, he showed me something else. A glimpse of what life would be like if I stayed. I saw Layla again, my daughter, waiting for me in the distance. Her arms open, her spirit radiant. I saw other loved ones. I saw rest, joy, completion. It was all mine, just one yes away. But then, the vision shifted. I saw the other path, the return. It was not easy. I saw pain, physical, emotional, spiritual. I saw rejection from people who would not believe my story. I saw the eyes of friends who would look at me differently. I saw questions I would not be able to answer, and a faith that would no longer fit neatly into any one box. But I also saw something beautiful. I saw one person sitting in a dark room, holding their head in their hands, ready to give up, until they heard my story. And I saw another, a woman standing by the grave of her husband, asking if he was truly gone, if there was really anything beyond the veil, and then hearing my voice, telling her, yes, there is more. The choice hung before me like two doors, neither forced upon me. Stay or return, eternity or time, peace or purpose. I turned to Jesus once more, and this time I didn't ask for clarity. I simply asked for courage, and he gave it to me, not as power, but as presence. His hand touched my chest, and in that instant, I felt a warmth like fire, like light, like memory itself being sealed within me. Then he whispered, not in sound, but in spirit, "You will not walk alone." I closed my eyes, and I said yes. The moment I said yes, the light began to dim, not in rejection, but in retreat, like a beloved guest stepping quietly back into the mist, knowing their part in the story, for now, was complete. I felt my soul moving, descending, not like falling, but like being drawn gently back to where it had come from. There was no pain, no fear, but there was sorrow, a holy sorrow. I was leaving something behind that words would never fully capture, a peace beyond peace, a love beyond understanding, a home more real than any home I'd ever known. I didn't pass through a tunnel. I didn't see stars or galaxies. It was more like I folded inward, as if the vastness of that eternal realm was being gently packed into a small container, my human body. Then, suddenly, shock. The harsh light of the hospital room, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the beeping of machines, and pain. Oh God, the pain. My chest burned like fire. My lungs screamed with every breath. And yet, I was breathing. I was back. I heard voices, shouts, gasps, the urgent tones of doctors. One nurse said something like, "He's stabilizing, my God, he's stabilizing." And in the distance I heard someone sob, a sound of utter disbelief and relief. It was my wife. Tears were running down my cheeks, but they weren't from the pain. They were from the loss. I had returned, but I had left part of myself behind. It took days before I could speak. When I finally opened my mouth to talk, the first thing I asked was, "What day is it?" The nurse smiled through tears and told me I'd been gone, clinically dead, for several minutes. Some thought it was longer. Some refused to believe it at all. But I knew what had happened. I tried to describe it once to one of the doctors. His eyes were kind but skeptical. He told me I'd had a hallucination, that the brain plays tricks under trauma. He offered medical terms: neural misfiring, oxygen deprivation, psychological projection. I nodded politely. I didn't argue, because what I had seen needed no defense. I knew what was real. I kept most of it to myself at first. I had no language for it. How do you explain touching love so complete it rewrites your DNA? How do you explain being embraced by someone you were taught wasn't yours, but the change in me was impossible to hide? I no longer feared death, not because I was reckless, but because I knew it wasn't the end. I no longer prayed out of duty, but out of intimacy. I didn't see God as a distant judge anymore, but as the very source of the love I had felt in Jesus' arms. And that terrified some people. Friends at the mosque noticed I was different. I still prayed, still honored my traditions, but something had softened. I stopped debating, stopped needing to be right. I started listening more, loving more, forgiving more easily. It confused them, it confused me. I remember my father asking, "What happened to you in that hospital?" And I told him, "I met someone I never expected to meet, and he changed me." He didn't press. Maybe he didn't want to know. Or maybe he did, but couldn't bear the weight of the answer. But one night, weeks after I had returned, my wife sat beside me in bed. She looked at me with wet eyes and asked, "Was she there?" I knew who she meant. "Yes," I said. Layla was there. And we both cried. In that moment, the pain of our loss and the gift of what I had seen came together. We wept not just for the past, but for the hope we now shared. She was safe, she was whole, and she was waiting. And so I lived, changed, quietly, deeply, forever changed. Not with all the answers, not with a new religion or a new label, just with a new heart, one that had been broken and healed by the hands of the one I once called a stranger. People often ask me what it was like. They want to know about the light, about the realm beyond, about the being who met me in the silence. They want descriptions, details. But the truth is, what I experienced goes far beyond what human language can express. Still, I try, because to remain silent would feel like betrayal, not of a religion, not of my past, but of the love I encountered, the love that saved me, not from death, but from despair. Jesus didn't come to me with a sword. He didn't come to debate or correct or claim territory. He came with one thing: love, fierce, holy, healing love. A love that looked at every part of me, the faithful and the failing, the believer and the doubter, and called me beloved. And that word changed everything. You see, before I died, I lived my life trying to earn closeness to God. I prayed, fasted, gave to the poor, obeyed the rules, did all I was taught, and I believed those things were what God wanted from me. But in that place, in His presence, I understood something far more profound. God doesn't want your performance. He wants you. He wants your brokenness, your fear, your wounds. He wants your questions, your contradictions, your trembling hands. He wants the real you, the one you hide, even from yourself. I learned that love isn't just something God has. It's what God is. And Jesus, He is the door into that love. Not because others are shut out, but because He is the one who stepped down into the pain with us, who meets us in the confusion, the mess, the longing, and says, "Let me carry this with you. I am not here to convert anyone. That's not my mission. I still hold dear many aspects of my upbringing, of my heritage, of my people's faith, but I can no longer pretend that the one I met was a figment of imagination or a symbol to be honored at a distance. He was real. He is real. And He knows you. If I could say one thing to anyone who has ever felt abandoned, who has cried out in the dark, wondering if anyone is listening, know this: you are not alone. There is someone who has been walking beside you since the moment you took your first breath. He's not waiting for you to be perfect. He's not watching from a throne with a list of your failures. He is the whisper in your grief, the warmth in your quiet victories, the open arms you've been aching to find. That someone is Jesus. And He loves you with a love that doesn't expire, doesn't weaken, doesn't depend on your performance. A love that isn't bound by religion or language or geography. I learned that death is not the end. It is a return, a homecoming. And what awaits us there is not punishment for the imperfect, but healing for the broken. I learned that every soul matters, that every act of love, no matter how small, echoes through eternity, that nothing is wasted. I learned that the dividing lines we draw here, between races, between faiths, between us and them, disappear in the presence of truth. In that place, we are only souls, and love is the only language spoken. Since returning, I've lived differently, slower, softer. I find God in the laugh of a child, in the silence of prayer, in the tears of a stranger telling me their story. I don't need to convince anyone anymore. I just need to love them, the way I was loved. If you've lost someone, know this: they are not gone. If you're afraid to die, know this: death is not darkness. It's a door. And on the other side of it is a love beyond anything you've ever known. That's the truth I brought back. That's the truth I now live by. And if one soul feels seen because of it, then everything I went through was worth it.